Hello and welcome to another edition of the Islamic Finance Weekly on Web TV powered by ProShare. On the sidelines of the recent 4th edition of the African International Conference on Islamic Finance, the Emir of Kano, His Royal Highness Mohammed Sanusi II, who was the keynote speaker, engaged stakeholders on the evolution of Islamic finance and its prospects for the development of the Nigerian market and economy. In his introduction, he gave an overview of the Islamic finance industry and its current global size.
Within a period of 4.5 decades now, it has grown from a niche to a mainstream financial intermediation system, growing in number of institutions offering its ethical financial services, growing also in asset size, geographical spread, and overall development, both in terms of regulation as well as existence of supportive infrastructural institutions. Emerging from its traditional home of the MENA and South and East Asia, it has found acceptance in global financial centers of Asia and Europe and has recently been embraced by emerging market economies like those in Africa. The industry has reached an overall total value of $2.19 trillion as of 2018, according to the 2019 IFSB Islamic Financial Services Industry Stability Report. Africa is a recent entrant into the Islamic finance marketplace. Nigeria, the most populous African nation and the largest economy on the continent, is among the pioneer nations to embrace Islamic finance. The introduction of the industry into the Nigerian economy has seen a fast growth in all its sectors. Despite the fact that the legislation providing the establishment of profit and loss sharing banks was enacted as early as 1991, it took almost 2 decades for us to witness the licensing of the first Islamic bank in Nigeria, which was in the last quarter of 2011.
Also, the Emir highlighted the history of the Islamic finance framework and its adoption level.
The framework, started by Sudan and fine-tuned by Malaysia, is now widely adopted by several jurisdictions in the MENA and South and Southeast Asia, including Bahrain, the UAE, Indonesia, Pakistan, Oman, and several others. The central bank has also developed and introduced a number of liquidity management instruments into the Nigerian money market as a step towards creating a non-interest interbank market in the financial sector and complement the lack of availability of non-interest instruments for wholesale funding and investment, as well as lender of last resort facility. Numerous initiatives in international Islamic finance organizations were also spearheaded by the bank, foremost of which was the joining of other central bank members of the Islamic Financial Services Board in forming the International Islamic Liquidity Management Corporation. This international body that specializes in offering short-term liquidity management instruments denominated in international currencies has been quite successful in achieving its mandate of creating a secondary market for Islamic financial instruments traded across borders.
He also gave insight into the development of the Alternative Finance Committee in Nigeria and the blueprint that led to the Sukuk issuances in the nation for infrastructure development.
Among the significant accomplishments in the development of Islamic finance in Nigeria was the establishment in April 2012 of the Joint Committee on Alternative Finance to develop a blueprint for issuing sovereign, sub-sovereign, and corporate Sukuk for infrastructure development in Nigeria. The initiative was born out of the realization of the efficacy of this new asset class in financing the enormous infrastructure deficits of emerging economies. Sukuk were used to build several expressways, airports, seaports, bridges, water treatment plants, electricity generation plants, affordable housing for urban and semi-urban communities, and many other infrastructure projects for economies like most of African for economies having huge infrastructure deficit with no hope of financing from the balance sheets of governments. The Joint Committee, which was an initiative of the Central Bank, comprised the CBN, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Debt Management Office, the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, with Jaiz Bank, Lotus Capital, and Ahmed Zakari & Co. as consultants. I would like to thank Hajara Adiola, who worked with us on this committee and this report, and she was a major contributor to that report, which led to the issuance of the Sukuk in this country.
Islamic finance, according to him, has the potential to broaden the investor base to include the growing category of investors seeking socially responsible and ethical investment.
Islamic finance has the potential to broaden the investor base to include the growing category of investors seeking socially responsible and ethical investment. The growing convergence of Islamic finance principles with principles of responsible investment, PRI, is the first step in broadening this investor base. The abhorrence of speculative transactions that only enrich investors without connection to the real economy is common to both Islamic finance principles and PRI. Also, the recent social impact bonds, Green Sukuk, and SRI Sukuk issued by Malaysia, and the recently launched value-based intermediation strategy by the Bank Negara Malaysia that focuses on creating an optimum allocation of resources to productive economic activities by using impact-based assessment considering the environment, society, and the economy are initiatives that further illustrate this convergence.
In summary, Emir Sanusi highlighted the opportunities of Islamic finance include for emerging markets like Nigeria.
African markets are a big opportunity for both Islamic and responsible finance. There are several African countries with Muslim majority population, the traditional ambience for the introduction and growth of Islamic finance. Despite this, Islamic finance is still in its infancy in the continent, which portends great growth opportunities. Furthermore, with emerging markets holding the biggest growth opportunity in the coming decades, as just 47% of impact invested funds are in the developed markets, and with significant investment needs to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, there will be a need to make new opportunities investable and impactful. Highlighted opportunities in Islamic finance, including Islamic social finance instruments such as Zakat, Waqf, Qard Hasan, and microfinance, are important to address challenges from limited investable opportunities, which is one of the most cited challenges for growth in impact investment across emerging markets. That is the limited investable opportunities despite large defined investment needs. It is worth stressing that the interconnectedness between the economic and social goals of sustainable development shows the imperative of an integrated approach to developmental issues in realizing the connection between poverty and vulnerability of the poor with lack of access to education and growing gender disparity and domestic violence. We have instituted societal reform programs in Kano that target 3 areas: reforms in the marital institution, access to education, especially for the girl child, and economic empowerment through reforms and resuscitation of the institutions of Zakat and Waqf. Overall, Islamic finance provides a potent alternative for resource mobilization and fair and equitable allocation of resources that could help address sustainable development goals. However, an essential condition for the development of Islamic finance markets is the presence of an effective legal and regulatory framework to provide an enabling environment that will create a level playing field and enforce the legality of Islamic finance contracts and ensure Sharia compliance. Regulators, especially in the banking, capital markets, and insurance, have been quite responsive to this development through creating an enabling environment, facilitating its integration into the mainstream financial sector, and generating awareness to achieve high levels of acceptance and thus high levels of financial inclusion. Going forward, there is a need for more collaboration between regulatory authorities to grow the industry, as well as more awareness generation and more professional development for effective and efficient operation of the institutions in order to instill and maintain stakeholder confidence and achieve optimum performance. The issuance of sovereign sukuk in Nigeria, South Africa, the Gambia, Senegal, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire are significant milestones for Islamic finance in Africa. However, there is an overarching need to make sukuk issuance as constant as possible in order to have a yield curve for each jurisdiction, which will encourage sub-sovereign and corporate sukuk issuances and thus deepen the sukuk market that is necessary for the growth of the trio sectors of Islamic banking, takaful, and Islamic capital markets. In addition, the CBN, as a pace setter, needs to continue with its initiative of developing non-interest liquidity management instruments, especially short-term papers for non-interest banks. Without these in the market, the possibility of creating a non-interest interbank market is very slim, which will impact negatively on the profitability of these institutions. Despite the potential for growth of the Islamic financial services industry in Africa, promoters need to be encouraged to establish more Islamic financial institutions so as to create the needed critical mass that is essential for the growth of the industry in the continent, and these institutions need to come together and support each other for advocacy and growth of the industry.
According to the Emir of Kano, Islamic finance provides an alternative for resource mobilization and fair and equitable allocation of resources that could help address the sustainable development goals in Nigeria. It believes the availability of more products in the capital market will be vital to the growth of the non-interest finance market in Nigeria. And that will be all for today's edition of this program. You can send your questions and comments to news@proshend.com and reporter@proshend.com. Also, you can engage us on our social media handles displaying on the screen. Many thanks for watching, and bye for now.